Homage to fundamental teacher Buddha Shakyamuni. Homage to wisdom, warrior Manjushri. Homage to all lineage, benevolent masters. The Dharma, infinitely profound and subtle, is rarely encountered even in 1,000,000 eons. Now we are able to hear, study, and follow it. May we fully realize Tathagata's true meaning in order to liberate all sentient beings from samsara, generate supreme bodhicitta. Now we continue to explain refuge in the words of my perfect teacher. In the section on refuge, we have already introduced the field of refuge in our last class. This is also called the merit field, or the refuge field is also called the merit field. We have explained Padmasambhava as the object of visualization. The main figure is Padmasambhava, whose essence is primarily the root guru. In front are the Buddhas of the 3 times. Behind are all the sutras and tantras, primarily the 17 tantras of the Great Perfection. On the left and right sides are the monastic communities of Mahayana and Hinayana, respectively. In the middle are countless peaceful and wrathful Dharma protectors and the 3 roots. You face the refuge field. In front are enemies and malevolent forces. On your left and right are your parents from this lifetime, along with countless beings from the 6 realms of samsara, all facing the refuge field, reciting the refuge verses, with your body visualizing and prostrating. If some of our Dharma friends haven't completed the 100,000 prostrations, previously, some teachers would combine refuge and prostrations together. When we first began practicing preliminaries, we would practice refuge and prostrations together. In my earliest days, I also led some Dharma friends in the Institute to practice the 5 preliminaries. At that time, we also asked everyone to practice refuge and prostrations together. If this is the case, there's nothing wrong with it. Because there are beings from the 3 realms and 6 destinies, your body prostrates while your mouth recites refuge verses. In your mind, you visualize. From today until attaining enlightenment, everything depends entirely on you. The 3 jewels. Other than you, even in dreams we won't seek anyone else, without consulting Father, without discussing with Mother, and without making my own decisions. Everything depends entirely on you. This is very crucial. If our minds are very sincere, usually wholeheartedly praying to the 3 jewels, wholeheartedly revering the 3 jewels, we will have such an attitude. If we recite with such an attitude 100,000 times, such a person will not easily change. It's impossible that after making 100,000 vows before the 3 jewels, you would then change. That would make one a particularly lowly and despicable person in this world. So why are there so many repetitions? It means refuge is very important, ensuring we never change. We must make such vows before the 3 jewels, with such determination to definitely take refuge in you. To strengthen our faith in this way is the purpose. So regardless, I very much hope that our Dharma friends here today, and those who will listen to the words of my perfect teacher through texts and recordings in the future, if you truly want to be a devout Buddhist, you must complete the 500,000 preliminaries. Our lineage masters throughout history have required this of us, generation after generation. In one's lifetime, except for a very few who are ill, or those who are particularly elderly, these people might find it difficult. Apart from this, one must find a way to complete the 500,000 preliminaries in this lifetime. I hope all of you present will make such a vow. For us, this is particularly important if we practice the 500,000 preliminaries very skillfully and completely. Then our future practice will be very solid and stable. If we're not even willing to practice this, perhaps superficially, except for a very few who don't need to practice. Like those with particularly sharp faculties, there might be such cases. I don't dare exclude them, but 90% of people, 95% of people, I think, should be gradual practitioners, not necessarily sudden enlightenment practitioners. So our lineage masters of the past all place special emphasis on this. Therefore, for everyone to practice this way has a particularly good lineage and auspicious connection. Such conditions are rare and precious for all of you. So you must complete the preliminaries. Some people are very confident in themselves, thinking they already have a high level of realization and don't need to practice this way. Well, if you truly can be certain of this, I won't force you, but I think our lineage masters, no matter how high their realization, also practice the 500,000 preliminaries many times in their lives, so we had better complete them this way too. It will benefit both you and all sentient beings. Now we explain below, if someone wonders, during refuge, why visualize one's parents on the left and right, while visualizing enemies and malevolent forces in front of oneself. Why are enemies and malevolent forces visualized as more important than parents? Shouldn't our parents from this lifetime be so important that these two should be visualized in front because they're getting old? Old companions, when old, they can accompany each other, so they're quite pitiful and should be placed in front. Why visualize enemies in front? If someone thinks this way, some people think enemies are very annoying, malevolent forces are annoying. Why visualize them in front? I don't even want to look at them, let alone visualize them in front. Some people might be unwilling to visualize those with whom they have particularly bad relationships. Such people in front. This attitude must be transformed. While practicing preliminaries, everyone must not forget about enemies. Don't think the Guru's heart. Essence of the great perfection is so sacred, we absolutely cannot let enemies come here. It cannot be like this. In Mahayana Buddhism, they must be visualized in front. Why is this? It explains here. This is because as practitioners who have entered the Mahayana, we should naturally cultivate compassion and bodhicitta equally toward all boundless sentient beings. One reason is this, because we are all Mahayana Buddhists, not non-Buddhists nor Hinayana Buddhists. Mahayana practitioners naturally should equally cultivate compassion and bodhicitta toward countless sentient beings. Whether Buddha Shakyamuni was on the path of accumulation or when he finally attained enlightenment, he treated Rahula and Devadatta equally, without discrimination. He didn't feel displeasure towards someone because they slandered him, or show extreme love towards someone because they were particularly good to him. It wasn't like this. So first, we should equally cultivate compassion and bodhicitta. If we previously had hatred toward them, if we previously had prejudice, we eliminate such attachments. This is one reason, especially to perfect vast merit accumulations and avoid destroying all accumulated virtue. It's completely necessary to place the cultivation of patience in the primary position. Especially, we need to perfect vast merit accumulations such as generosity, ethics, patience, and other merit accumulations, and so that the virtue we've previously accumulated won't be destroyed. For this purpose, we must cultivate patience, placing patience in the foremost position. When you visualize refuge, patience cannot be separated from it. If you don't cultivate patience, you cannot be included in Mahayana Buddhism, so patience must definitely be cultivated. Otherwise, if you have anger, all your virtue will be destroyed. All the virtue from ethics and generosity, accumulated over thousands and hundreds of eons, will be destroyed, so we must cultivate patience, just as it said. Without objects that generate anger, with whom would one practice patience? That is to say, only by relying on enemies and malevolent forces harming us. Can we accomplish the difficult practice of patience? This is also explained in the way of the Bodhisattva. If there are no objects that generate anger, with whom would we practice patience? Cultivating patience is very precious for bodhisattvas. If you want to practice generosity but there are no beggars, then there would be no object for generosity. Therefore, enemies are extremely rare, like jewels appearing in poor homes. As stated in the way of the Bodhisattva, enemies are very rare, like wish-fulfilling jewels appearing in poor households, which is extremely uncommon. They assist in the practice of enlightenment, therefore one should rejoice in one's enemies. Hateful enemies can assist us in cultivating the Bodhisattva path, so we must definitely rejoice in our enemies and be very happy when enemies arrive, just like poor people encountering wish-fulfilling jewels. But many of us, because our practice capacity is insufficient, don't want to see enemies, don't want to hear enemies' voices, only willing to see people with whom we have good relationships, only willing to associate with those who share the same view, meditation, conduct, and fruition. Such people we're willing to associate with. This is why our practice of the patience paramita is particularly poor. So here it says, if there were no hateful enemies or malevolent forces, how would we practice patience? There would be no patience paramita among the 6 perfections. Among the 6 perfections, the earlier ones are relatively easier to practice. For example, generosity is relatively easy. Comparing generosity and ethics, ethics is more difficult. Between ethics and patience, patience is also more difficult. Between patience and diligence, diligence is harder. Between diligence and concentration, the latter is progressively more difficult. So generally speaking, giving away some things and maintaining precepts is relatively easy. But when facing harm from enemies, truly practicing patience at that time is not easy. To complete the 6 paramitas, patience must be included. If we carefully examine this, it's not difficult to discover. From the perspective of practice, enemies and malevolent forces have greater kindness than our parents. If we don't examine this, we might not know. From the perspective of worldly people's usual concepts, parents' kindness is as heavy as mountains, while we hate enemies and malevolent forces to the bone. We have such attitudes. It's just that this is our habitual way of thinking. We can change it if you examine carefully. Actually, enemies and malevolent forces are more important than parents. Why do we say this? What parents teach us are all the deceptive means for accomplishing worldly benefit, making it impossible for us in future lives to free ourselves from the abyss of the lower realms. From this perspective, parents' kindness is not that great. Everyone knows that worldly people, from childhood, after parents raise you, how to start a family, how to kill living beings, how to make friends, etc. Various worldly methods and behaviors, mainly based on greed, anger, and ignorance. From childhood, they begin instilling such education in you. From this perspective, parents' kindness is not very great. What about enemies and malevolent forces? Among them, enemies create obstacles for us and hinder our practice, thus becoming objects for our practice of patience. Because we have enemies and malevolent forces, we have opportunities to practice the patience paramita, and they make us involuntarily cut off and distance ourselves from the bonds of samsara we've been unable to escape for so long, wealth, possessions, etc., which are the source of all suffering. These hateful enemies force us to distance ourselves from or cut off the bonds of samsara. What are the bonds of samsara? They are wealth, the source of all suffering, because hateful enemies have robbed all our wealth, or malevolent forces create obstacles making us become poor, etc. So for us, their kindness is very great. Previously in the Buddhist scriptures, there was such a story. There was a wealthy person who, when departing, had 2 sons, and when leaving, he left a will saying that the elder son must take care of his younger son. After they grew up, the elder son married a wife. This wife particularly hated the younger son and often complained about him. Later, she said to her husband, "Your brother must find a way to leave this family now. Otherwise, when he grows up, he will be harmful to us in such and such ways." After she repeatedly stirred up trouble like this, once the brother really had no choice and took his younger brother to the cemetery. Originally, at first, he intended to kill him, but later couldn't bear to do it. Finally, in the charnel ground, he saw there were many wolves, wild dogs, and fierce beasts. Finally, he found a way. He tied his brother to a tree with rope. He thought after one night these fierce beasts would definitely eat him, so he pretended to say to him, "You've made many mistakes in my house. Today I'm punishing you by tying you up in the charnel ground for one night. If you're not dead tomorrow, I'll come get you." Then at night he tied him there and left. After he left, when evening came, various wolves and wild dogs, these fierce beasts were howling everywhere. He was very frightened because it was getting dark and he couldn't move. He thought, "In this world, if there's someone with great compassion who could save me," and kept praying to Buddha. Later, Buddha emitted light, the first light, because he was in extreme suffering in darkness. A great light appeared that dispelled all darkness. The second light was the liberating light that freed all his bonds. The third, because he hadn't eaten all day and was very hungry. Then came the satisfying light. Later, Buddha seemed to appear personally before him to give teachings. Later, not only did he not encounter these obstacles, but he also attained noble fruition. When he attained noble fruition, upon examination, he felt grateful to his brother and his sister-in-law, in the sweeping sense. The woman who sweeps is called sister-in-law. Then he felt gratitude toward both of them. because if they hadn't harmed him, he wouldn't have gone there to pray to Buddha and wouldn't have attained fruition. Later, he used supernatural powers to return home. When he arrived home, both of them felt very embarrassed. Originally, they intended to kill him, but he had already attained noble fruition. Later, through his teachings, they also attained certain levels of realization. So, from this story, some people, relying on enemies, truly generate Dharma benefits in their mind streams. So many of our Dharma friends here should also think carefully. When they first began studying Buddhism and entering the Buddhist path, they also had many difficulties, especially perhaps in Han regions, some monastics, and some lay practitioners. At the beginning, weren't necessarily believers in Buddhism, even particularly rejected Buddhism, but later some people, because of poor health, some people encountered unsatisfactory events in their lives. Through such conditions, they gradually entered the Buddhist path. There are such circumstances. So in this process, whether it's enemies or malevolent forces, at the time you felt particularly painful, but later indeed, if you hadn't encountered such suffering back then, you might still be drowning in such a sea of suffering. So in our practice process, we must definitely visualize our enemies, non-humans, and malevolent forces. All humans and non-humans who create obstacles for our practice and our lives can all be visualized in front. The reason is also like this. Malevolent forces are likewise objects for our practice of patience, making him suffer disease and painful torments. Through such torments, we can purify the many karmic forces we created in the past. Because malevolent forces harm us, my body is unwell, my mood is bad. Finally, we go everywhere, seeking refuge, generating bodhicitta, reciting sutras, gradually, the negative karma in our mind streams. Through their obstacles, we get the opportunity to purify it. For example, the Venerable Milarepa, relying on his uncle and aunt who seized all their family's wealth and possessions. Through this external condition, he was able to encounter the true Dharma. Milarepa's biography has been mentioned several times before. I won't mention it here. At that time, if his father hadn't died and his uncle and aunt hadn't harmed him, perhaps he might not have had such high achievement in his lifetime, but because they harmed him so deeply, his hatred at that time was particularly strong. You all know when Milarepa left his own family, his mother accompanied him part way at that time, seeing others who were also learning harmful spells going with him. Many of them had heard that those teachers had relatively effective harmful spells. Some of them went out of curiosity. His mother repeatedly told Milarepa, "Thopaga," she said, "you are different from them. They are going to practice harmful magic for novelty and pleasure, but we are truly at our wits' end. Our relatives have harmed us so much that we really have no choice. If you don't learn well this time when you return, I will die in front of you." So at that time his mother gave him these instructions. Later, when Milarepa was practicing harmful magic there, often his mother's words from when he departed would appear before his eyes. "Oh, I must learn well. If I don't learn well, my mother will surely die before me." He kept thinking this way. Sometimes he would think, "Oh, I must learn well. I must be able to harm my uncle and the others." With such an attitude he studied, and after studying he indeed committed terrible crimes. Finally, when he saw so many people had died, so many other beings had died, he later developed genuine remorse. So the hateful enemies at that time were truly the sole cause of Milarepa's accomplishment in that lifetime. Later, after he attained accomplishment, he often dedicated merit. He dedicated this virtue to them as well, as can be seen in his biography. There's also the story of the auspicious nun from Tibetan areas. The auspicious nun was in a monastery in the Lhasa area. This is the story of a nun. This nun was originally a princess of a king. From childhood, she was very beautiful and had great wealth and position. In this situation, many members of royalty and nobility sought her hand in marriage. Later, unfortunately, when she was about 16 years old, she contracted a terrible disease caused by evil nagas and leprosy. Her whole body rotted. At that time, the princes who had previously sought her hand in marriage all distanced themselves from her. Even her own parents looked down on her, making her leave the palace, leave her own place. At that time, she realized the fickleness of human relationships and the reality of impermanence. Later in a snow mountain, she practiced Avalokiteshvara's teachings for 12 years. Later, 11-faced Avalokiteshvara appeared to her personally. She asked how she could escape from such suffering. Later, Avalokiteshvara continuously blessed her, teaching her the 11-faced Avalokiteshvara practice for benefiting beings. Then her body completely healed. After healing, she became more beautiful and attractive than before. When she returned to the palace, the same people were again very pleased with her. At this time, she completely saw the impermanent and meaningless nature of all worldly things. Knowing this, she later became a nun. After ordination, she diligently practiced and propagated Avalokiteshvara's teachings. In Tibetan areas, there is specifically a Palmo lineage that was passed down by this nun. Previously, when we went to India, at that time, Avalokiteshvara Guru specifically transmitted this teaching. The Palmo lineage teachings are still very sacred. Up to now, they continue to flourish greatly in Tibetan areas. So, when she contracted such a disease back then, if disease demons had not afflicted her, indeed she might not have had the opportunity for today's ordination or accomplishment. Later, she truly attained accomplishment. Palmo Bhikkhuni, or the auspicious nun Vajrakilaya, also has her lineage. The Nyingma school of Tibetan Buddhism also specifically discusses some of her transmissions. So some of us, because you contracted certain illnesses, due to this illness, you later truly encountered the Dharma. In our academy, I know of some individual Dharma friends who previously had particularly serious illnesses. Later, they themselves wholeheartedly wanted to ordain, completely letting go of disease demons. Later, everything including cancer was cured. Such cases exist several times in our academy. So truly, if one wholeheartedly takes refuge, wholeheartedly yearns for Buddha, the blessing power of Buddha and all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas causes all one's obstacles to completely disappear. And in this way, when we finally look back and think, oh, if I hadn't had such illness back then, or hadn't had such obstacles, I might now be just like worldly people, every day drowning in the sea of suffering of the 8 worldly concerns, without the conditions for liberation. We would think this way. So from this perspective, enemies and malevolent forces indeed have kindness toward us. Through such examples as these, we can see that enemies and malevolent forces as causes for encountering the true Dharma can be said to have profound kindness, as the omniscient Longchenpa said in the precious treasury of Pith Instructions. Suffering harm causes one to encounter the true Dharma. Those who bring the path to liberation have great kindness. This is from the precious treasury of Pith Instructions. It should be from the precious treasury of Pith Instructions. We have suffered harm from others. Because of this reason, we have already encountered the true Dharma, so we obtain the path to liberation. In this way, those who harm us have very great kindness. Previously, in the garland of examples, adorned by poetic fancy, there was also a story. There was a Brahmin sage who didn't believe in Buddhism. He had several Brahmins with whom his relationship was not good. These Brahmins once deliberately wanted to trouble him. Several of them went to the monastic community and invited on behalf of the sage. Could they come tomorrow to the sage Brahmin's house for offerings? The monastics had already agreed. And when the next day came, because that sage Brahmin didn't believe in Buddhism, he didn't understand, they deliberately had the monastics come to his house. If he didn't make offerings, it would probably be shameful for him. Later, when the next day came, he discovered monastics at his door. At this time, the sage Brahmin thought, oh, I never called them, but if they came today, it must be that these people deliberately harmed me. So at that time, since he wasn't a Buddhist, he pretended to immediately invite them inside. He asked his family to immediately prepare delicious food to make offerings to them. After making offerings, an elder among them said to him, you yourself don't believe in Buddhism. According to our regular ceremony, after offerings, we should teach the Dharma. Will you listen if we teach the Dharma? The sage said, because at that point he said, yes, please teach me. Although I'm not a Buddhist, you can teach me the Dharma. Then they taught him the Dharma. When teaching, they explained the Four Noble Truths and the principles of samsaric suffering. As they taught, this Brahmin indeed developed tremendous faith in them. Later, through the power of this faith, he had already attained noble fruition. Only afterward did he realize that those people who had originally harmed him had very great kindness toward him because they deliberately harmed him, but not only couldn't harm him, instead they enabled this person to be freed from all suffering. So when we look at history, some people truly relied on bad methods trying to harm others, but instead they encountered the true Dharma. Their kindness was great. Renouncing suffering causes one to encounter the true Dharma. Obtaining eternal bliss, suffering has great kindness. Some people renounce suffering because they encounter things like family members dying or other suffering. Later, because of suffering, they encounter the true Dharma. When Dakpo Rinpoche was a householder, he had a very good relationship with his wife. Later, his wife died, and after she died, he felt extremely sorrowful. Then he went to Milarepa. Later, he had already attained particularly high realization. It was Dakpo Rinpoche, wasn't it? Yes, it was also like this. There's also the nun Utpalavarna, who in one lifetime encountered so much suffering. Because of this suffering, she later encountered the true Dharma and attained liberation. In this way, the suffering in our lives. Perhaps some individual Dharma friends, because they previously encountered various sufferings in their families. In this lifetime, obtain the true Dharma and are very grateful to those sources of suffering. Non-human harm causes one to encounter the true Dharma. Obtaining fearlessness, ghosts and demons have great kindness. Because non-humans harm you and you encounter the true Dharma. Finally, you attain the deathless and fearless state. In this way, the kindness of ghosts and demons is also very great. When Milarepa was practicing at Lashi Snow Mountain, many spirits and ghosts appeared. Milarepa also said in his Vajra songs, "The more you spirits and ghosts appear, the higher my realization becomes. I'm very grateful to you." Because when they created obstacles for him, he also had the opportunity to practice patience and to abide steadily. So, our Dharma friends, in the usual process of practice, don't think, "Things are not going well for me again. When I walk down the road, I often see people who don't get along well with me. I don't want to see their faces. Oh, I don't want to walk this road. I should take another road in the future." Others' anger causes one to encounter the true Dharma. Obtaining benefit and happiness, those who are angry have great kindness. Others' anger. You later encounter the true Dharma and obtain benefit and happiness. So those who were angry at that time had great kindness. Previously, during the Tang dynasty, there was someone called Maziyun who originally worked under the king. Later he was imprisoned and for 5 years continuously recited Buddha's name. Later, when he was released, he also achieved pure rebirth. So, those obstacles he had back then were actually very good favorable conditions for him. Intense negative conditions cause one to encounter the true Dharma, obtaining the unchanging path. Negative conditions have great kindness. Encountering intense negative conditions such as illness, or when particularly strong negative conditions appear in life. In such cases, encountering the true Dharma makes practice even better. I've mentioned before, Lama Garkha was criticized every day during the Cultural Revolution. Each time he was criticized, he would practice the 3 supreme methods very well. Finally, near his passing, he said, "Throughout my life, what I practiced was exchanging yourself and others. Practicing by exchanging yourself and others was most effective and beneficial. So when we encounter some obstacles, when we encounter some unfavorable circumstances, we suffer ourselves, we feel sad ourselves. But noble beings, those with slightly higher realization, won't be like this." You see, when Bodhisattva Asanga was ill, his disciples asked him what method to use for treatment. Asanga said, "If my being ill is beneficial to sentient beings, may I be ill. If my dying can benefit sentient beings, may I die. If my being healthy is beneficial to sentient beings, may I be healthy." With such an attitude, anything is fine. When I was translating the biography of Asanga, these words had a great impact on me later in life, although I couldn't truly practice this way. Every time I was ill, every time I encountered any kind of obstacle, to completely practice this is very difficult. The conduct of noble beings is very difficult, but indeed I often remember and think, well, no matter what, if my being ill is beneficial to sentient beings, may I be ill. Even if just pretending and saying it verbally It's very helpful for one's mental attitude. So our method of transforming obstacles into the path is completely different from ordinary worldly people's methods of transforming obstacles into the path, because for us, everything can become medicine, as mentioned in the instructions for training the mind for skilled doctors. All the plants and vegetation on the mountain are nothing but medicine, all medicine, and for those who practice well. When you encounter happiness, it's also a favorable condition for practice. When you're ill, it's also a favorable condition for practice. When you're not ill, it's also a favorable condition for practice. So some negative conditions also lead to encountering the true Dharma this way and obtaining the path of boundless great bliss, boundless Buddhahood, or noble fruition. So negative conditions also have great kindness. Others' advice causes one to encounter the true Dharma. Obtaining the quintessential meaning, advisors have great kindness. Others advise you to take refuge, to study Buddhism. Later, encountering the true Dharma, you've already obtained the quintessential meaning of the supreme great perfection. So that person who advised you, who guided you at that time, others brought you to the academy, others brought you to take refuge with such and such a teacher. At the beginning you didn't know how to take refuge. You couldn't even bow your head. Bow your head down. Bow down for what? Then those people, their heads got higher and higher. At the beginning they understood nothing. They couldn't even bow their heads, just slightly lowering the head. No such refuge. But gradually, they all became great Dharma teachers. One of our Dharma teachers, when he first came, his refuge was like this. Who is it? Guess, equally repaying their kindness, dedicate virtue to them. Whether these are humans, non-humans, or enemies, we must equally repay their kindness. Whether parents or hateful enemies, we must dedicate virtue to them all. Therefore, enemies and malevolent forces not only have great kindness toward us in this lifetime, but they were also our parents in past lives throughout countless lifetimes. Visualizing this way is very important. Why can't enemies be visualized in front? Patrul Rinpoche is also particularly good at explaining this, so after finishing this explanation, we originally thought truly. At the beginning, when we were told to visualize enemies in front, our hearts still felt a bit uncomfortable. After explaining it this way, I can understand, wow, yes, in the middle he explained such a principle. Finally, when concluding the session, you should also use your respectful devotion as a condition each time at the beginning when visualizing and reciting refuge verses. Finally, when concluding the session, with your devotion as the condition, visualize all the noble beings in the refuge field emitting countless rays of light, illuminating yourself and all other sentient beings. Finally, all the noble beings in the refuge field, primarily Padmasambhava. Emit countless lights that merge into yourself and all sentient beings like birds startled by a slingshot, flying up with a flutter flutter sound, merge into the noble beings of the refuge field. When we conclude the session through such devotion, they emit light that merges into ourselves and all sentient beings. All sentient beings, because of the light, are all like a flock of birds startled by a slingshot. I've mentioned this before. This probably needs explanation. When herding, there's specifically a tool with rope, a tool for throwing stones. Snap, like this, if you throw a stone into a group of many sparrows, hundreds of sparrows all fly away with a flutter flutter. So all of us sentient beings, startled by the light just now, all merge into Padmasambhava and the refuge field. Everyone should be able to visualize this. This isn't anything particularly deep, like the generation and completion stages. All merge into the refuge field. All the noble beings in the refuge field gradually merge from the edges into the center, like dissolving into light, slowly from the surroundings into the central Padmasambhava and consort, then merging into the central guru who embodies the three jewels in one. In the center is Padmasambhava. All the noble beings stacked above his crown also merge into the Guru below. All the lineage Gurus above gradually merge into Padmasambhava. The Guru also merges into light, and the light dissolves into the Dharmadhatu. Finally, your mind abides as much as possible in the essence of the Dharmakaya, free from elaboration, beyond conceptual dispersion and gathering. Of course, if you have such realization, abide in such a state. It's best, for example, when reciting refuge verses, when practicing alone, slightly abide and visualize. When arising from the session, dedicate virtue to boundless sentient beings and recite. Today, we will recite this in a moment. Namo Guru Benza Sato Hung. Lama Yidam Kandrot Sonam Dang. Sangye Chodang Pakpo Gendun La. Dadak Chakchik Gepe Kiab Suchi. Then slightly abide. When arising from meditation, Geva Diyi Nye Dak. After that, Sonam Diyi. Recite like this, Geva Diyi Nye Dak Kanchok Sumpo Drup Gyurne. Udrawa Kyechi Malupa Deisalago Parsho. By this virtue may I swiftly accomplish the 3 jewels and establish all beings without exception on Buddha's ground. Finally, dedicate like this, everyone will definitely be able to practice refuge. There's nothing you can't practice about this. You must practice according to this method. After practicing this way more often, the blessings of the 3 jewels merge into your mind. After the blessings of the 3 jewels merge into your mind, your practice becomes very smooth. Naturally, many things are not seeming like, after practicing a little bit, you have no feeling at all. It's not like this. Now, some people practice wind, channels, and essence drops. Practice completion stage. They've practiced for so many years, but have no feeling at all. Actually, if we first practice well, the most fundamental basic teachings, other great perfection views and conduct won't be very difficult. We should always maintain mindfulness and vigilance while visualizing the noble beings of the refuge field. The refuge field with Padmasambhava as the main figure that you just visualized cannot be separated from. Always practice, when walking, visualize the noble beings of the refuge field that we visualize in the space above your right shoulder as the object of circumambulation. When you go anywhere, you don't need to specifically circumambulate stupas. Actually, your own refuge field is on your right shoulder. Visualize this way. When sitting, visualize these refuge field beings above your head as the object of prayer. Actually, many teachers in the past, no matter where they sat, would always think the refugee field with lineage masters and Padmasambhava as the main figure was right above their heads, continuously visualizing this way as the object of prayer. Lama Chenno, they would often pray when sitting, when enjoying food and drink, visualize them at your throat as the place for offering first portions of food and drink. Regardless of what kind of food, I see many of you are doing quite well. For example, when eating, everyone takes refuge in the 3 jewels. Previously, in a guide to the words of my perfect teacher, it was repeatedly emphasized, I also require, including people from Bodhi groups, I require them all. When receiving offerings, could you recite this verse beforehand? Tonpalame Sangye Rinpoche, Kyopalame Damcho Rinpoche, Drempalame Gendun Rinpoche, Kiabne Konchok Sumla Chopor Bul. If you're making offerings, you say Chopor Bul. If you're praying, say Solwadeb. The ending Solwadeb means prayer. In this way, visualizing the 3 jewels above your head. Solwadeb for prayer is fine. Offering is also fine. These last few words can all be changed. When sleeping, visualize them at your heart as visualizing at your heart is also fine, or as will be explained later. If visualizing at your heart is inconvenient, visualize in front of you, above your head, or beside your pillow. Think that all the noble beings of the 3 jewels are watching over you with compassion. The key point for dissolving deluded dream states into the realm of luminosity. In summary, in all 4 postures of walking, standing, sitting, and lying down, remain in the state of clearly visualizing the assembly of the refuge field. Actually, if our practice is a bit better, it doesn't matter if we can't practice other things. often keeping the refuge field in all walking, standing, sitting, lying down, whether you're in a car or doing anything, often not departing from the realm of the three jewels, makes one a very good practitioner, and with such an attitude for the benefit of all sentient beings, didn't we explain before? Superior refuge is for the benefit of all sentient beings. We take refuge this way. With unwavering faith and conviction, sincerely relying on the three jewels, perseveringly practicing refuge. Perseveringly, not just for 1 or 2 days. Oh, I'm now practicing preliminaries. During the 1 or 2 months of practicing preliminaries, Lama Lakyab Suchi O, Sangye Lakyab Suchi O, Namo Guru Benza Sato Hung, Lama Yidam. After finishing the practice, never paying attention to it again. It's not like this. Truly good practitioners do this for their entire lives, taking it as their main practice and deity practice throughout life. It's not because you practice the 500,000 preliminaries for a few months or 1 year that you visualize a bit. I myself first received this teaching over 20 years ago. Indeed, my visualization is particularly poor, but I still know its importance. Basically, I can say, to claim I've completely never departed from it would be boastful. I haven't. But in this life, when I can remember during daily activities, I visualize in all walking, standing, sitting, lying down. For over 20 years it's been like this. I think it will continue this way in the future too. It's hard to say about the next life. After the human body changes, whether one has such mindfulness and vigilance is very hard to say. But in this lifetime, except for extremely serious illnesses, at such times it might not be possible, or other causes that might produce wrong views and such. If there aren't such things, I think it won't change during my lifetime, because when I first started studying the words of my perfect teacher, Khenpo Depa taught us, in particularly great detail, repeatedly requiring that we must do this. Some old practitioners are completely different. Their own lives are like this, and when they teach us, it's also like this. Later, when I came to the academy, His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche also repeatedly taught that we as Buddhists should keep the refuge field at all times in walking, standing, sitting, lying down. The refuge field cannot be separated. This was also particularly emphasized through the guidance of these spiritual teachers' instructions. Basically, we don't dare speak of very high realizations, but indeed, the importance of the refuge field and the sequence of refuge field practice. Basically, I don't dare say I've never forgotten even for a moment, nor dare say I've never forgotten for even a day. But I think in a month I should visualize several times. I think there should be that much. If I'm not lying, it should be like this. So I hope our Dharma friends here will, throughout their lives, take refuge as the most important practice. This is not for completing 500,000 preliminaries. In order to listen to a teaching, it's not like this. We as Buddhists who have taken refuge in the three jewels, throughout life should conclude our lives with such faith. This is what I think. Now let's explain the trainings of refuge. Let me explain the trainings of refuge a bit. The trainings of refuge. After taking refuge, there should be refuge vows, divided into 3. First are 3 things to abandon. Second are 3 things to practice. Third are 3 common aspects. First, the 3 things to abandon. After we take refuge, the 3 types of precepts we must abandon. After taking refuge in Buddha, one can no longer prostrate to so-called worldly gods of samsara. That is to say, one cannot take those who haven't freed themselves from samsaric suffering, Ishvara, Vishnu, and other non-Buddhist deities, as well as local spirits, earth spirits, and other worldly powerful ghosts and spirits as ultimate refuge. You cannot take them as eternal, ultimate refuge, forever, life after life, taking them as your refuge field. This cannot be done. Prostrating and making offerings to them, all these are unreasonable. So, as a Buddhist, first we must take refuge in the 3 jewels. To take refuge in the 3 jewels, the first is taking refuge in Buddha. After taking refuge in Buddha, what can't you do? That is, worldly gods like Ishvara or God, Christ, or other so-called non-Buddhist deities. From the perspective of harmonious coexistence of all religions. In a broad sense, not calling them non-Buddhist is also fine, but from a narrow sense, after we take refuge in Buddha, if you take refuge in other divine beings, other celestial beings, taking them as eternal, permanent, with all liberation depending on them, Such refuge is actually unreasonable. Some people say, this is what Tibetan Buddhism teaches. Would all of Buddhism have such a concept? Actually, yes, in volume 8 of the Mahaparinirvana Sutra. You can look it up when convenient. It's also there saying, those who take refuge in Buddha are truly called upasakas. After taking refuge in Buddha, they are called true lay people, true upasakas. They will never again take refuge in other gods and spirits. After taking refuge in Buddha, you are a true layperson. From then on, you cannot take refuge in other gods and spirits. This is not allowed. So this point is not entirely a Tibetan Buddhist teaching. Therefore, if you truly want to be a Buddhist, then other divine beings, including earth spirits, like Taoist deities and some ghosts and spirits, taking them as ultimate refuge is unreasonable. Then why do we say ultimate offering place? Generally worldly guardian deities for certain activities. There are also some worldly ones, for example, locally offering to earth spirits and guardian deities. They are companions to assist my enlightenment. In the world, there are often offerings to earth spirits, offerings to some nagas, fox spirits and such. When I went to some places previously, they had many local offerings to immortals, earth spirits and celestial nagas. In the process of making offerings to them, you should think, I am for the sake of enlightenment. In the process of becoming enlightened, they help me accomplish things. I'm not permanently taking refuge in you. It's not refuge. There's still some difference between refuge and offering. So we make offerings to them to accomplish benefiting beings and the activity of enlightenment. These ghosts, spirits, and 8 classes of gods and nagas are also in many of Padmasambhava's liturgies. When we make offerings to protectors, among protectors, some are wisdom protectors, some are karma-bound protectors, some haven't yet attained realization, but worldly ones are no different from ghosts and spirits. It's just that they've taken refuge before some accomplished masters like Padmasambhava. These serve as our companions, not ultimate refuge. Regarding these issues, I hope many of our people should understand people who understand the Dharma now. Sometimes when speaking like this, maybe it sounds too boastful, as if I particularly understand the Dharma and others don't, but sometimes looking online or at some books, taking a simple Buddhist term and making one-to-one correspondences with everything. For example, the day before yesterday there was someone, when I was explaining refuge from the words of my perfect teacher, when many people asked questions, isn't Buddhism about equality? Why is there refuge? Why is there high and low status? How can there be, I take refuge in you? I originally wanted to say, in that case, men and women are all equal. How can there be rich and poor people, leaders and followers? Actually, for a single term, not just in Buddhism, but even in the world, you can't say that because we speak of gender equality. All men and women have equal height and equal rights. It's not like this. So now many people's understanding of Buddhism is extremely low. They find one similar word in Buddhism and extrapolate everything from it. In that case, not to mention Buddhism's profound principles, even worldly matters would be unreasonable. If Buddhism is all pure, then seeing impurity is particularly simple. Sometimes I really don't want to answer others' questions. I can only smile. After taking refuge in the Dharma, one must abandon harming sentient beings to the best of one's ability, prevent problems before they occur, and strive so that even in dreams one doesn't harm beings. You see, after taking refuge in the Dharma, not to mention killing beings, some people in Han regions have already taken refuge in the 3 jewels, but still kill chickens, kill insects, kill mosquitoes and cockroaches, taking some fans and starting to slap, slap, slap. I hear even some Dharma teachers do this. It says here, you can't harm, not to mention kill. The Nirvana Sutra also says, those who take refuge in the Dharma are free from killing and harming. People who take refuge in the Buddha Dharma stay away from killing and harming all beings. The Nirvana Sutra says killing and harming. Our words of my perfect teacher says harming. One cannot harm beings. Even slightly harming beings is unreasonable, let alone truly killing them. So we Buddhists must definitely abstain from killing. If you haven't abstained from this, then your refuge in the 3 jewels. Many people carry their refuge certificates in their bags and then start killing beings. This must be clearly explained to everyone, otherwise it's unreasonable. So I think as a Buddhist, not harming beings, not killing beings, is a precept of taking refuge in the Dharma. After taking refuge in Sangha, one cannot befriend non-Buddhists. That is, one cannot associate with non-Buddhist sects who don't believe in Buddhism or Teacher Buddha associating with such non-Buddhist people who don't believe in Buddha or Buddhism. Now many people associate with them. Perhaps just speaking with them or being together with them, sometimes with people who don't believe in Buddhism, perhaps eating a meal together. These things are hard to avoid, but our views absolutely cannot coexist with theirs. That would be unreasonable in Tibetan areas, although there aren't true non-Buddhists. But those who insult and curse teachers and who slander and blaspheme the true Dharma, we consider those who destroy the true Dharma, corrupt the true Dharma, and slander teachers, as well as those who slander the profound teachings of Vajrayana, to be the same as non-Buddhists. Those disrespectful to teachers and the Dharma are basically the same as non-Buddhists. Absolutely cannot have intimate contact or friendly relations with them. As we usually say, stay away from negative friends and the Bodhisattva practice. When practicing any teaching, such people who are disrespectful to teachers and teachings, if you associate with them for too long, eventually all the virtue in your mind stream will be destroyed. So, after taking refuge in the Sangha, we must definitely stay away from such people. Those who take refuge in the noble Sangha do not seek non-Buddhists. The Nirvana Sutra also teaches this. Those who take refuge in the Sangha do not seek to associate with non-Buddhists. Thus, taking refuge in the Three Jewels, one attains fearlessness. The Nirvana Sutra finally says, taking refuge in the Three Jewels this way, one attains the realm of fearlessness. Other Buddhist scriptures also say, if one respects the Three Jewels, one will attain the Three Bodhis. If we respect or revere the Three Jewels, we attain the three types of enlightenment. Staying away from the three views, one will not generate sufferings. Staying away from the three kinds of wrong views that lack faith in the Three Jewels, etc. In this way, one won't generate various sufferings in the world. One will definitely attain liberation. Alright, let's stop here for today.
Bandara Bandara